Who could have imagined that the person I trusted most would choose the exact moment I was sound asleep to betray me one night? One card, and one devastating swipe that left me waking up in a living nightmare. But instead of crumbling, I decided to turn that knife in my back into the very weapon that would end her game forever. Some betrayals cut so deep they don't just wound, they transform you into something far more dangerous than your betrayer ever anticipated. My name is Clara Monroe, and I used to believe that blood was thicker than water. That belief died at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday night in October, though I wouldn't discover its corpse until 6 hours later. The street lamp outside my bedroom window cast its usual amber glow through the thin curtains, painting familiar shadows across the hardwood floor of my Chicago apartment. I'd fallen asleep around 11:30, exhausted from another 14-hour day at Harbor Point Analytics, where I spent my life drowning in spreadsheets and data models that determined whether small businesses lived or died. The Ambien had kicked in hard, pulling me into that deep, dreamless sleep that made me dead to the world. I never heard the soft creak of my bedroom door opening, never felt the mattress dip slightly as someone leaned over my nightstand, never sensed the careful fingers sliding my wallet from the drawer where I kept it every night, extracting the sleek black credit card that represented years of careful budgeting and a credit score I'd fought tooth and nail to rebuild after my divorce. Julia moved like a ghost through my apartment that night. My 28-year-old sister had been staying with me for 3 weeks, claiming she needed time to figure things out after her latest boyfriend drama. I'd given her my spare key, my Wi-Fi password, and apparently unlimited access to betray the one person who'd never stopped believing in her. While I slept, she was online booking a first-class flight to Los Angeles. While my body recuperated from another soul-crushing day of corporate servitude, she was purchasing a diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany & Co. While I dreamed of nothing, she was reserving the penthouse suite at the Beverly Hills Hotel. My phone started buzzing at 6:47 in the morning. The first notification was from Chase Bank, large purchase alert $3,200 at American Airlines. I fumbled for my phone, still groggy, assuming it was some kind of error. Then came the second alert, $2,100 at Tiffany & Co. Then the third, $1,800 at Beverly Hills Hotel. The fog of sleep cleared instantly, replaced by a cold dread that started in my stomach and spread through my veins like ice water. I sat up in bed, my hands trembling as notification after notification lit up my screen. Louis Vuitton, Neiman Marcus, Wolfgang Puck's restaurant. Each charge felt like a physical blow, each dollar amount another nail in the coffin of my financial security. By 7:15 in the morning, the damage was complete, $11,500, gone, vanished into the ether of my sister's weekend getaway while I'd been unconscious and vulnerable in my own bed. I stumbled to my nightstand, already knowing what I'd find. My wallet lay exactly where I'd left it, but it felt different lighter. I opened it with shaking fingers. My driver's license was there. My insurance cards were there. The $23 in cash was there. But the black Visa card that had taken me 3 years to qualify for after my credit tanked during the divorce that was gone. The apartment felt different now, tainted by betrayal. I walked down the hallway to the guest room where Julia had been staying, my bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. The door was ajar. Inside, the bed was made with hospital corners, the way our mother had taught us as children. The dresser was empty. The closet was empty. Even her phone charger was gone. She'd planned this, every detail, every moment. While I'd been offering her a safe place to land, she'd been calculating exactly how to rob me blind and disappear before I woke up. I stood in that empty room, surrounded by the ghost of my sister's presence, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. I'd survived that during my divorce. It wasn't even anger. Not yet. It was something colder, more dangerous. It was the moment when unconditional love finally learns to set conditions. The morning sun streamed through the guest room window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny pieces of my shattered trust. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Julia was probably sipping champagne and laughing about how easy it had been, how predictable her big sister was, how she'd sleep through anything. She was right about that last part. I had slept through everything, including years of smaller betrayals, borrowed money that never got repaid, lies that I'd chosen to believe because family was supposed to mean something. But I was awake now, fully, completely awake, and Julia was about to learn that sleeping giants, once roused, don't go back to sleep quietly. I called Julia's phone 17 times in the next hour. Each call went straight to voicemail, her cheerful recording echoing back at me like a taunt. "Hey, it's Jules. I'm probably having too much fun to answer, so leave me something good." The casual cruelty of those words hit differently now. She wasn't just having fun. She was having fun with my money, my trust, my stupidity. By 9:30 in the morning, I'd moved from frantic phone calls to social media stalking. Julia's Instagram account, which she updated religiously, had been silent for days. Her Facebook showed nothing recent. Twitter was a ghost town. For someone who documented every meal, every outfit, every mundane moment of her existence, this radio silence felt deliberate and calculated. Then I found her Snapchat. The first photo nearly made me drop my phone. Julia, radiant in what looked like a brand new silk dress, raising a champagne flute against the backdrop of the Hollywood Hills. The timestamp read 43 minutes ago. The caption was a single emoji, a crown. I screenshotted it before it could disappear, my fingers moving on pure instinct. The next snap appeared 12 minutes later, Julia and some guy I didn't recognize lounging beside what had to be the most expensive pool I'd ever seen. His arm was draped possessively around her shoulders, his smile lazy and entitled. The Beverly Hills Hotel logo was clearly visible on the towels beneath them. My legs gave out. I sank onto my couch, staring at the image of my sister living a fantasy life funded by my financial ruin. The guy looked familiar in that vague way that attractive. Wealthy men often do, like he could be the lead in any romantic comedy or the face of any luxury car commercial. His watch alone probably cost more than I made in a month. The third snap arrived as I sat there in my pajamas, surrounded by bank notifications and the debris of my shattered trust. This one was a boomerang video of Julia sliding a diamond bracelet onto her wrist, the same bracelet that had generated a $2,100 charge on my card 3 hours earlier. She held her hand up to catch the light, the stones throwing rainbow fragments across her face as she laughed soundlessly at the camera. I felt something crack inside my chest, not my heart, but something deeper. Some fundamental belief about human decency that I'd been carrying around like a security blanket my entire adult life. Julia wasn't just stealing my money. She was celebrating it, flaunting it, performing her betrayal for an audience of strangers while the person who'd trusted her sat alone in an empty apartment, watching her life savings evaporate in real time. The rational part of my brain, the data analyst part that lived on spreadsheets and logical outcomes, began to catalog the evidence, the strategic emptying of her room, the carefully timed flight that would put her across the country before I woke up, the immediate blocking of my calls, the social media blackout except for a platform where evidence disappears automatically. This wasn't the impulsive mistake of a young woman in love. This was premeditated theft, executed with surgical precision. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. Screenshots of the bank notifications, saved images of her Snapchat story, timestamps and amounts, and the growing paper trail of my sister's betrayal. Each piece of evidence felt like armor, protecting me from the emotional devastation threatening to consume me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How's Jules doing? She seemed so stressed last week." I stared at those words, feeling a bitter laugh bubble up from somewhere dark inside me. Stressed. Julia had been stressed about how to rob me most efficiently. Stressed about whether I'd wake up during her midnight heist. Stressed about which designer boutiques to hit first once she landed in LA. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. She's fine. Felt like a lie. She stole $11,000 from me. Felt like dropping a nuclear bomb into the family group chat. She's living her best life on my credit card. Felt like the kind of sarcasm that would require an hour-long explanation. Finally, I settled on, she's in LA. We need to talk soon. The response came back immediately. Oh, how exciting. I'm so proud of her for being spontaneous. She's been so responsible lately. Responsible? The word tasted like acid in my mouth. I set the phone aside and returned to my laptop, pulling up Julia's Instagram from a browser where I wasn't logged in. Sometimes people forgot to make their stories private across all platforms. There it was, posted 27 minutes ago to her Instagram story. Visible to her 800 followers, a perfectly curated flat lay of luxury shopping bags spread across what looked like Egyptian cotton sheets. Tiffany & Co., Louis Vuitton, Neiman Marcus, each bag a monument to my financial destruction. Each logo a slap in the face to the sister who'd given her everything. But it was the caption that turned my blood to ice water. When the universe finally rewards your patience. Blessed are living my best life. Worth the wait. Worth the wait. As if she'd been planning this. As if my trust, my home, my financial security had been nothing more than a long con, and she'd finally decided to cash in her chips. I sat in my living room, surrounded by the morning light streaming through windows that had felt safe just hours before, and realized that the person I'd been protecting and supporting and believing in for 28 years had never existed at all. Julia wasn't a lost soul who needed guidance. She wasn't a victim of circumstances who deserved my help. She was a predator who'd been playing the long game, and I'd been nothing more than her mark. The sister I'd loved was dead. She'd probably been dead for years, and I'd just been too blind to see the corpse. But the woman sitting in this apartment, documentation spread across her coffee table like battle plans, wasn't the same person who'd gone to sleep last night. That woman had believed in family loyalty and second chances and the fundamental goodness of people she loved. This woman was something entirely different. This woman was done being anyone's victim. The memories came flooding back as I sat there, each one a piece of evidence I'd been too blind to see. Julia had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. When she was 7 and I was 13, she'd broken Mom's antique vase while throwing a tantrum and somehow convinced everyone that I'd knocked it over while doing homework. I spent 3 months without allowance paying for the replacement. When she was 16, she'd crashed Dad's car into the neighbor's mailbox after sneaking out to a party. I was 22 and home from college that weekend. Somehow, I became the designated driver who should have been watching her more carefully. Julia got her license back within a month. I got lectures about responsibility that lasted until Christmas. The pattern was so clear now, so painfully obvious that I wondered how I'd missed it for decades. Julia created chaos. I cleaned it up. Julia made mistakes. I paid for them. Julia needed help. I provided it without question, because that's what big sisters do. That's what family does. Except family wasn't supposed to steal your credit card while you slept. I remembered the phone call 3 weeks ago when she'd shown up at my door with 2 suitcases and tears streaming down her face. He cheated on me, Clara. Marcus cheated on me with my best friend, and I have nowhere else to go. I'd held her while she sobbed, made tea, listened to her broken heart pour out onto my kitchen table. I'd given her my spare room, my Wi-Fi password, and complete access to my life without a second thought. Now I wondered if Marcus had even existed, or if he was just another prop in Julia's elaborate performance. The guy in her Snapchat photos looked nothing like the Marcus she'd described tall, dark, and brooding. This new man was blonde, clean-cut, and wore the kind of casual confidence that screamed old money. I pulled up her Instagram again and scrolled back through months of posts. There was Marcus exactly as she'd described him, tagged in dozens of couple photos right up until 3 weeks ago. But looking at them now with clear eyes, I noticed something I'd missed before. In every single photo, Julia looked bored. Not heartbroken in love bored, but actively, desperately bored, like she was waiting for something better to come along. Something better, someone with more money, someone who could fund the lifestyle she felt she deserved. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Julia hadn't been heartbroken when she came to me. She'd been calculating. Marcus probably was a decent guy with a normal job and normal expectations that she contribute something to their relationship. But Julia had never contributed anything to any relationship except her presence. And apparently, she'd decided that wasn't enough anymore. So she'd manufactured a crisis, moved in with her financially stable sister, and spent 3 weeks conducting reconnaissance, learning my routine, my sleeping habits, where I kept my cards, probably going through my mail when I was at work, cataloging my credit limits and available cash. I thought about all the times she'd offered to cook dinner, insisting I relax while she took care of everything, how she'd volunteered to tidy up my bedroom, claiming she wanted to help with housework for once, the way she'd asked casual questions about my job, my salary, my savings questions I'd answered openly because family was supposed to trust each other. Every kindness had been surveillance. Every helpful gesture had been espionage. Every moment of sisterly bonding had been her gathering intelligence for this exact betrayal. The rage that hit me was clean and cold, like stepping into a freezer. This wasn't the messy, emotional anger of someone who'd been hurt by accident. This was the focused fury of someone who'd been systematically deceived and deliberately robbed by the person she'd loved most in the world. I remembered our childhood, how I'd always been the responsible one, the one who remembered to feed Julia's pet hamster when she lost interest, the one who did her homework when she was too stressed, the one who covered for her when she snuck out, lied to teachers, shoplifted lip gloss from the drugstore because everyone does it. Clara, don't be such a nerd. Our parents had created this monster by never letting Julia face consequences. Every time she messed up, they'd swoop in with excuses and clean-up crews. She's just spirited, Mom would say. She'll grow out of it, Dad would add. When she got arrested for drunk driving at 19, they'd hired the best lawyer in town and somehow gotten the charges reduced to reckless driving. When she'd been fired from 3 jobs in 2 years for chronic lateness and attitude problems, they'd helped her with rent until she found something new. And me, I'd been their accomplice in enabling her. Every time I'd bailed her out, covered for her, or made excuses, I'd been reinforcing the lesson that actions didn't have consequences, at least not for Julia. Other people would always clean up her messes. Other people would always pay her bills. Other people would always sacrifice their own well-being to maintain the fiction that Julia was just misunderstood. Well, other people were done. I thought about the call I'd have to make to our parents, how they'd react when I told them their precious baby girl had committed credit card fraud, how they'd scramble to find ways to make this my fault somehow. Maybe I should have hidden my cards better. Maybe I shouldn't have trusted her. Maybe I was being too harsh, too unforgiving, too unwilling to understand that Julia was just going through a hard time. The familiar script was already writing itself in my head, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt something I'd never experienced before, complete and total indifference to my parents' opinions. They'd made their choice 34 years ago when they decided that protecting Julia was more important than teaching her right from wrong. They'd chosen their golden child, and I'd spent 3 decades accepting the crumbs of their affection while funding Julia's chaos. But sitting in my ransacked apartment, looking at evidence of my sister's calculated betrayal, I realized I had choices too. I could choose to stop being the family cleanup crew. I could choose to let Julia face consequences for the first time in her privileged life. I could choose to prioritize my own financial security over their comfort. I could choose to stop being the responsible one and start being the dangerous one. The shift was tectonic, fundamental, irreversible. The old Clara, the one who'd gone to sleep last night, had died somewhere between 2 a.m. and 6:47 a.m. This new version had been forged in betrayal and tempered in rage, and she was about to teach my family what happened when you mistook kindness for weakness. Julia thought she'd played the perfect con, but she'd made one critical error in her calculations. She'd assumed I'd stay asleep forever. The first call I made was to Chase Bank at exactly 10:15 a.m. I spoke to a fraud specialist named Rebecca who had the kind of professionally sympathetic voice that suggested she'd heard every sob story in the book. But I wasn't calling to sob. I was calling to build a case. "I need to report unauthorized use of my credit card," I said, my voice steady and clinical. The perpetrator had physical access to the card and used it while I was asleep. I have documentation of the transactions and proof that I was not in California when these charges were made. Rebecca walked me through the standard fraud protocol. Card immediately frozen. Dispute forms filed. Temporary credits issued within 5 business days pending investigation. But I wasn't just interested in getting my money back, I was interested in creating an official paper trail that would lead straight to Julia's perfectly manicured fingertips. Ma'am, do you have any idea who might have had access to your card?" Rebecca asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I know exactly who took it, and I have evidence." After hanging up with the bank, I opened my laptop and began what I privately called Operation Documentation. If Julia thought she could pull off the perfect crime, she'd severely underestimated my professional skills. I hadn't spent 6 years as a data analyst without learning how to build airtight cases from digital breadcrumbs. First, I created a secure folder on my computer titled Financial Fraud, October 2024. Inside, I systematically organized everything screenshots of every bank notification with timestamps, saved images of Julia's social media posts showing her in LA with the stolen merchandise, photos of my empty wallet and her abandoned room. Each piece of evidence was labeled, dated, and cross-referenced. But that was just at the beginning. I pulled up the security camera footage from my apartment building's lobby. The management company had installed new HD cameras last year after a string of package thefts, and I'd blessed that paranoid building manager every day since. I scrolled through the footage from yesterday evening, looking for Julia's exit. There she was at 11:43 p.m., wheeling 2 suitcases through the lobby like she was heading to a normal vacation. Her face was clearly visible, her expression calm and determined. No signs of distress, no indication that she was fleeing anything traumatic. Just a woman executing a plan. I saved the footage to my fraud folder and made a mental note to request copies for official use. Next, I began tracking Julia's digital footprint with the kind of methodical precision that had made me valuable at Harbor Point Analytics. Every social media post, every tagged location, every visible timestamp was documented and cataloged. I created a timeline that would make any prosecutor weep with joy: Julia boarding a plane purchased with my card, checking into a hotel charged to my account, wearing jewelry bought with my money. But the smoking gun came when I dug deeper into the airline booking. I'd learned a few tricks about accessing purchase details during my divorce, when I'd had to track down my ex-husband's hidden assets. The American Airlines booking confirmation that had triggered my first fraud alert showed Julia's flight was purchased at 2:37 a.m., exactly when I would have been in my deepest sleep cycle thanks to that Ambien. More damning was the seat selection. She'd upgraded to first class, changed her meal preference to the premium option, and even added priority boarding. These weren't the panicked choices of someone making an emotional decision. These were the calculated selections of someone who'd been planning this theft for weeks and wanted to maximize the damage. I pulled up her Venmo account next. Julia was chronically oversharing on social media, and her financial transactions were no exception. Sure enough, there was a payment from 3 days ago. Marcus K. had sent her $50 with the note, "Gas money for your escape plan." My blood turned to ice. Marcus wasn't just a convenient ex-boyfriend, he was an active co-conspirator. They'd been planning this together, probably laughing about how easy it would be to rob the naive big sister who always cleaned up after everyone else. I screenshotted the Venmo transaction and added it to my growing file. Then I did something that would have horrified the old Clara I called in a favor with a contact at Harbor Point who specialized in digital forensics. "Hey, Tom, it's Clara from the 3rd floor. I need a personal favor, and I'm willing to pay your consulting rate." Tom Rodriguez was a former FBI cybercrime specialist who now worked corporate security. He was also the kind of guy who got genuinely excited about catching criminals, regardless of whether they were corporate hackers or credit card thieves. "What kind of favor?" he asked, already intrigued. "Someone stole my credit card and I need help building an absolutely bulletproof case. I'm talking about the kind of evidence that makes prosecutors salivate and defense attorneys recommend plea bargains." "I'm listening." I explained the situation with clinical detachment, focusing on the evidence rather than the emotions. Tom listened without interrupting, occasionally making those little sounds that meant he was mentally cataloging vulnerabilities and building strategies. "So you want to destroy her?" he said when I finished. It wasn't a question. "I want justice," I corrected. "But yes, I want her to face real consequences for the first time in her entitled life." "I can work with that. Send me everything you've got so far, and I'll show you how to turn a simple fraud case into a federal crime with interstate implications." After Tom and I hung up, I realized that somewhere in the last 4 hours, I'd crossed a line I'd never even known existed. The old Clara would have called Julia, begged her to come home, offered to work out a payment plan that wouldn't involve law enforcement. The old Clara would have protected family at any cost, even when that family was destroying her. But this new version of myself felt no such loyalty. Julia had declared war the moment she'd slipped that card from my wallet, and I was going to respond with overwhelming force. I opened a new document and began drafting an email to my parents, not to ask for their help in getting Julia home safely, but to inform them that their daughter was about to become a defendant in a criminal case. The email was short, factual, and completely devoid of the emotional appeals they'd expect from their pushover eldest daughter. But I didn't send it. Not yet. First, I was going to give Julia exactly what she'd always wanted: the spotlight. I was going to make sure that when she fell, everyone would be watching. And I was going to make sure that fall was spectacular enough to ensure she'd never get back up to hurt anyone else ever again. Julia thought she'd stolen my money and disappeared into her fantasy life. What she'd actually done was hand me every piece of evidence I needed to destroy her completely. Some lessons are worth $11,000. The dinner invitation went out on Thursday evening, 3 days after Julia's grand theft. I crafted it carefully, like a spider spinning the perfect web. Family dinner this Saturday at 7 p.m. My treat. I have some exciting news to share, and I think it's time we all got together. Julia should be back from her spontaneous LA trip by then. Can't wait to catch up with everyone. Mom responded within minutes. "Oh, wonderful, I've been so worried about you both. Dad and I will bring wine." Julia's response took longer, probably because she was calculating whether it was safe to come back to Chicago yet. Finally, at 11:23 p.m. "Sounds great, sis. Can't wait to tell you about my amazing trip. See you Saturday." The emojis felt like tiny daggers. Even now, even while actively destroying my life, she was performing the role of loving sister with Oscar-worthy dedication. I spent Friday preparing for the evening like a general preparing for war. Tom had delivered exactly what he'd promised: a forensic analysis that transformed my sister's weekend getaway into a federal case study. We had digital fingerprints, GPS locations, even metadata from her social media posts that proved premeditation. Everything was organized in a presentation that would make a courtroom gasp. But the centerpiece wasn't the evidence, it was the setting. I transformed my dining room into something that looked like a celebration but felt like a tribunal. Fresh flowers on the table, expensive wine breathing in crystal decanters, my grandmother's china set out like we were honoring visiting royalty. I even bought one of those fancy projection screens that would display perfectly from my laptop. The theater of it all felt appropriate. Julia had been performing for our family her entire life. Tonight, I was going to give her the stage she'd always craved. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Chicago feel alive and dangerous. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a black blazer over dark jeans, professional but approachable. The kind of thing I wore to deliver bad news to clients at work. Hair pulled back, minimal makeup, no jewelry except for my watch. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, someone who'd moved beyond emotion into pure, calculated purpose. Dad and Mom arrived first at 6:55, punctual as always. Dad carried a bottle of Cabernet that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill, and Mom had brought her famous rosemary bread that only appeared at special occasions. "Clara, darling, you look so composed," Mom said, kissing my cheek. "I was worried you'd be devastated about Julia's little adventure, but you seem to be handling it well." Little adventure? The casual dismissal of $11,000 in fraud made my jaw clench, but I smiled sweetly. "Oh, I'm handling it very well. Better than anyone expects." Julia arrived at 7:12, fashionably late as always. She walked through my door like she owned the place, wearing what I now recognized as the silk dress from her Snapchat photos, the one purchased with my credit card. The diamond bracelet caught the light on her wrist, throwing little sparks across my walls like scattered evidence. "Clara," she squealed, throwing her arms around me in a hug that felt like being embraced by a beautiful snake. "God, I missed you so much. LA was incredible, but there's nothing like coming home to family." The performance was flawless. Her smile was radiant, her energy infectious, her enthusiasm so genuine that anyone watching would think she'd just returned from a well-deserved vacation rather than a cross-country crime spree. "Julia, sweetheart, you look absolutely glowing," Mom gushed. "That dress is stunning, and that bracelet—" "Thank you." Julia held up her wrist, letting the diamonds catch the chandelier light. "I got it at this amazing little boutique in Beverly Hills. A splurge, but sometimes you have to treat yourself, right?" Dad nodded approvingly. "Good for you. Jules, you work hard. You deserve nice things." I served dinner with the kind of gracious hostess energy that Martha Stewart would have envied. Conversation flowed easily. Mom's garden, Dad's golf game, Julia's detailed recap of her LA adventure that was 90% fiction wrapped around 10% stolen truth. She described restaurants I'd been charged for, hotels my credit card had funded, experiences my money had bought, all while smiling at me across the table like we were sharing some wonderful secret. "The concierge at the Beverly Hills Hotel was amazing," she said, cutting into the filet mignon I'd ordered specifically for this evening. "He set up this private shopping experience at Rodeo Drive. I felt like Pretty Woman." "How wonderful that you could afford all that," I said mildly, refilling her wine glass. "LA can be so expensive." "Oh, you know me," Julia laughed, taking a sip of the wine that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. "I've been saving up for something special for months. Sometimes patience really pays off." The words hit exactly as she'd intended them to, a private joke between conspirators, an acknowledgement that her patience in playing the loving sister had finally been rewarded. She thought I was still asleep, still playing my role as the enabling older sister who'd never question her story. As we moved to dessert a chocolate torte that cost $200 and was worth every penny for this performance, I felt the familiar electricity that preceded major presentations at work, the calm before revealing data that would change everything. "So," Mom said, settling back with her coffee, "you mentioned you had exciting news to share." I smiled and reached for my laptop. "I do. Actually, it's more of a presentation, something I've been working on all week." The projection screen hummed to life, displaying my carefully crafted title slide, "Family Accountability: A Case Study in Trust and Consequences." Julia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. For just a second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes, not quite fear, but the first hint of awareness that the game might be changing. "Oh, how fun," she said, her voice still bright but with a slight tremor underneath. "What kind of case study?" I clicked to the next slide, a photograph of my empty wallet, time-stamped and labeled, the kind that explores what happens when trust is weaponized and consequences are finally served. The room went completely silent except for the soft hum of the projector and the sudden, sharp intake of breath from three people who were just beginning to understand that dinner was over. The trial was about to begin. The next slide was a timeline, clean, Unprofessional. Devastating. Tuesday, October 15th, 11:43 p.m. Subject exits building with luggage. The security camera footage played in crisp HD, showing Julia wheeling her suitcases through the lobby with the calm determination of someone executing a carefully planned operation. Wednesday, October 16th, 2:37 a.m. Unauthorized purchase of American Airlines first-class ticket using victim's credit card. The booking confirmation filled the screen. Every detail highlighted the upgrade fees, the premium meal selection, the priority boarding that had cost an extra $60. Julia's face had gone white beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Clara, what is this? This is some kind of joke, right?" I clicked to the next slide without answering. Bank notifications cascaded down the screen like a digital waterfall of betrayal. Each transaction was time-stamped, location-tagged, and cross-referenced with Julia's social media posts that proved she was in possession of the stolen merchandise. "Clara," Dad's voice carried a warning tone that had made me shrink as a child. "This is inappropriate. If there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, my voice calm as a glacier. "Just documentation. Would you like to see the Snapchat evidence next, or should we jump straight to the Venmo transaction between Julia and her co-conspirator Marcus?" "Co-conspirator?" Mom's voice cracked. "Clara, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" I clicked again. The Venmo screenshot filled the screen. Marcus K. to Julia M. $50. Gas money for your escape plan, 3 days ago. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my neighbor's television through the walls. Julia stared at the screen like it was displaying her own death certificate. "This is insane," she whispered, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. You're making this into something it's not." "Am I?" I clicked to the next slide. "Let's review the evidence systematically." What followed was the presentation of a lifetime. Every screenshot, every bank record, every piece of digital evidence that Tom and I had compiled over the past week. Julia's location data from her phone placing her at every store where my card was used, the timestamps proving she'd been shopping while I slept, the metadata from her social media posts showing premeditation and calculation. "The total theft amounts to $11,500, I said, my voice steady as a courtroom prosecutor. "The evidence shows clear premeditation, interstate transportation of stolen financial instruments, and conspiracy with at least one additional party." "Stop," Dad said, his face flushed with anger. "Stop this right now. This is family. Clara, we don't handle family problems like this." "You're right," I said, clicking to a new slide. "We don't handle family problems. We enable them, ignore them, and let them grow until they become federal crimes." The new slide showed a police report number and a case file reference, which is why I've already filed a formal complaint with the Chicago Police Department, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and the Federal Trade Commission. Julia made a sound like a wounded animal. Mom gasped and pressed her hand to her chest. Dad shot to his feet so fast his chair crashed backward. "You called the police on your own sister." His voice was thunderous, the kind of rage I'd only seen him direct at restaurant servers and traffic cops. "I reported a crime," I corrected. "The fact that the criminal happens to share my DNA doesn't change the law." Julia found her voice again, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "Clara, please. I can explain. I can pay you back. This doesn't have to—" With what money? I clicked to another slide showing her bank balance from a financial background check Tom had helped me run. "You have $312 in your checking account and $17,000 in credit card debt. Were you planning to rob someone else to pay me back?" "That's enough!" Mom stood up, her face streaked with tears. "I don't know what's gotten into you, Clara, but this is cruel. This is vindictive. Julia made a mistake." A mistake. The laugh that came out of me was sharp enough to cut glass. $11,000 in coordinated theft isn't a mistake. It's a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. I clicked to the final slide, a photo of several thick file folders. I've documented everything: bank records, security footage, social media evidence, digital forensics, witness statements from hotel staff in Beverly Hills who remember Julia specifically because she was so rude to them while spending my money. Julia started crying, not the pretty tears of a wounded victim, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone watching their world collapse in real time. Please, Clara, I'm your sister. I'm family. You can't do this to family. Family, I repeated, tasting the word like poison. Family doesn't steal from each other while they sleep. Family doesn't plan elaborate cons and celebrate their success on social media. Family doesn't conspire with ex-boyfriends to rob the one person who's always protected them. I walked over to the sideboard and picked up the thick stack of folders I'd prepared: legal documents, police reports, bank statements, and evidence files. I set them on the table with a solid thud that seemed to echo in the stunned silence. "The police will be here at 9 p.m. to take formal statements," I said, checking my watch. It was 8:47. "You have 13 minutes to decide whether you want to confess voluntarily or wait for them to present the warrant for your arrest." "Clara!" Dad's voice had gone from angry to pleading. "You can't be serious. She's your sister. She's our daughter. We can work this out as a family. We can get her help. Set up a payment plan." Help. I looked at him with something that might have been pity if I'd had any left to spare. "You've been helping her avoid consequences for 34 years. Look how well that's worked out." Julia grabbed my arm, her fingers desperate and clawing. "I'll do anything, anything. Please don't let them arrest me. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back every penny. I pulled my arm away with the kind of gentle firmness I'd use to remove a spider from my house. "You had 34 years to learn how to be a decent person. You chose theft instead." The doorbell rang at exactly 9 p.m. Through the window, I could see the red and blue lights painting my neighbors' houses in official colors. "That would be the police," I said, walking toward the front door. "I suggest everyone stays calm and answers their questions honestly." Behind me, Julia's sobs turned into something approaching hysteria. Mom was pleading with Dad to do something, and Dad was staring at me like I'd just revealed myself to be an alien creature wearing his daughter's face. "Clara, wait!" Julia's voice was barely human now. "Wait, please! I'm begging you! Don't open that door!" I paused with my hand on the doorknob and turned to look at my sister one last time. She was crumpled in her chair, the expensive dress wrinkled and stained with tears, the stolen bracelet still glittering on her wrist like evidence of her own destruction. You want to know the difference between us, Julia," I said softly. "When I make a decision, I live with the consequences." Then I opened the door and let justice walk into my dining room. The police officers who entered my dining room were exactly what I'd hoped for: professional, thorough, and completely immune to family drama. Detective Sarah Martinez, a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every sob story in the book, took one look at my organized evidence files and nodded approvingly. "Ms. Monroe, I understand you've reported credit card fraud with evidence of interstate theft." "That's correct," I said, gesturing to the folders. "Everything is documented and cross-referenced. The perpetrator is present and wearing some of the stolen merchandise." Julia looked up from her sobbing with mascara streaking down her cheeks, the diamond bracelet still catching the light like a beacon of guilt. Detective Martinez's partner, Officer James Park, immediately took note of the jewelry and began photographing it from multiple angles. "Ma'am, I need you to remain calm while we sort this out," Detective Martinez told Julia, her voice firm but not unkind. "You have the right to remain silent, and I'd recommend exercising that right until you speak with an attorney." "She's my daughter," Dad interjected, his voice shaking with rage and desperation. "This is a family matter. Clara is being vindictive over some misunderstanding." "Sir," Officer Park's voice cut through Dad's protest like a blade. "Credit card fraud is a federal crime. Family relationships don't supersede federal law. Mom had stopped crying and was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not just disappointment or anger, but something approaching genuine fear. Clara, please, think about what you're doing. This will destroy her life. She'll have a criminal record. She'll never get a decent job. You're ruining your own sister's future over money. The words hit exactly as she'd intended them to. For 34 years, that argument had been their nuclear option, the guilt that would make me back down. Compromise. Find a way to fix things without anyone having to face real consequences. The responsible daughter cleaning up the mess to preserve family harmony. Her future. I looked at Mom with something that felt like clarity. What about my future? What about the retirement savings she stole? What about the emergency fund I'd built up over 6 years that's now gone? What about the credit damage that will take years to repair? We can work out a payment plan, Dad said desperately. Julia will get a job, pay you back monthly. We'll help if we have to. Just, please don't do this. Detective Martinez looked up from the evidence files with raised eyebrows. Ma'am, this is extraordinarily well documented. I've rarely seen such thorough preparation for a fraud case. I'm a data analyst, I said simply. Documentation is what I do. Officer Park had finished photographing Julia's bracelet and was now examining the designer dress she wore. Ma'am, I need you to provide receipts for these items. Do you have proof of purchase? Julia's silence stretched until it became its own answer. Finally, she whispered. I don't have them with me. Because they were purchased with my credit card, I said, pulling out the corresponding receipts from my evidence folder. Tiffany & Co., bracelet, $2,100. Diane von Furstenberg dress, $850. Both charged to my account while I was asleep in Chicago and she was shopping in Beverly Hills. The weight of the evidence was crushing. Detective Martinez closed the folder and looked directly at Julia. Miss Monroe, you're under arrest for credit card fraud, identity theft, and interstate transportation of stolen goods. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights felt like a liturgy of justice. Each word was another nail in the coffin of my family's dysfunction, another step toward the accountability that had been 34 years overdue. Clara, stop this! Mom pleaded as Officer Park guided Julia toward the door in handcuffs. She's your baby sister. She made a mistake. Please. She's a 34-year-old woman who committed multiple felonies, I corrected. And she's not my problem anymore. Dad stepped in front of me, his face purple with rage. If you let them take her, don't expect us to forgive you, ever. You'll be choosing strangers over family. The threat that had controlled me my entire life suddenly felt powerless. I'm choosing justice over enablement. I'm choosing my own financial security over your comfort. I'm choosing to stop being complicit in your creation of a criminal. She's not a criminal, Mom screamed. She's just currently being arrested for federal crimes. Detective Martinez interjected dryly. Ma'am, I need you to step back and let us do our job. Julia turned back at the doorway, her face a mask of desperation and disbelief. Clara, please, I'll never ask for anything again. I'll disappear if you want. Just don't let them take me to jail. For a moment, I saw her as she was not the golden child, not the family princess, but a terrified woman facing the first real consequences of her life. The old Clara might have wavered. The old Clara might have found a way to fix this, to negotiate some private solution that kept the family intact. But that Clara had died 3 days ago at 2:37 a.m. when her sister had chosen theft over trust. The time for asking was before you robbed me, I said quietly. The time for negotiations was before you celebrated my financial ruin on social media. The time for mercy was before you planned this with your co-conspirator and executed it while I slept. I walked to my front door and held it open. Now it's time for consequences. Detective Martinez handed me her card as they led Julia out. We'll need you to come in tomorrow to finalize your statement. This is a solid case. The evidence you've compiled makes prosecution almost automatic. Good, I said. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. After the police car pulled away, Mom and Dad stood in my driveway looking lost and broken. Through my window, I could see them having an animated conversation, probably strategizing about bail money and lawyer fees, and how to spin this disaster into something that wasn't entirely Julia's fault. They could spend their retirement savings on legal fees if they wanted. They could mortgage their house to pay for the best defense attorney in Chicago. They could exhaust themselves trying to save their golden child from the consequences of her own choices. I was done participating in their delusion. I closed the door, locked it, and turned off the porch light. For the first time in 3 days, my apartment felt peaceful. The evidence folders were gone, handed over to the proper authorities. The stolen jewelry was tagged and bagged as evidence. The financial hemorrhaging had finally stopped. Julia was no longer my problem. She was the state of Illinois' problem now. And I was finally, completely, blissfully free. 5 days later, Julia showed up at my door at 6:30 in the morning. She looked like she'd aged a decade in less than a week. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, hair that hadn't seen a professional stylist since her arrest. The designer dress was gone, replaced by an oversized sweatshirt that probably belonged to whatever friend had bailed her out. I watched her through the peephole for a full minute before deciding to open the door. She stood there shivering in the October cold, tears already streaming down her face before she'd said a word. "Clara," she whispered, her voice raw and broken. "Please, I need to talk to you." "Talk to my lawyer," I said, starting to close the door. "Wait." She put her hand against the door, not pushing, just touching it like a lifeline. 5 minutes, please. I'm begging you." Against my better judgment, I opened the door wider. "You have 5 minutes. Say what you came to say." She stepped inside, but barely, hovering near the entrance like she expected to be thrown out at any moment. The confidence, the entitlement, the casual cruelty that had defined her entire personality, all of it was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen in my sister before: genuine fear. "I'm sorry," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm so sorry. Clara, I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." I crossed my arms and waited. Apologies were just words, and Julia had always been excellent with words. "I know you have no reason to believe me," she continued, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "But jail. God, Clara, jail was horrible, really horrible, and the lawyer Dad hired says I'm looking at federal charges, real prison time, not just county jail, 2 to 5 years minimum." "Good," I said without hesitation. "Maybe that will teach you something that 34 years of family enablement couldn't." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I know I deserve it. I know I brought this on myself. But Clara, please. I can't survive prison. I'm not strong like you. I'm not built for that kind of life." "You should have thought about that before you stole my credit card." I was desperate. The words exploded out of her, raw and honest in a way Julia rarely allowed herself to be. Marcus left me for someone with more money, someone who could afford the lifestyle he wanted. I felt so worthless, so disposable. And when I saw how successful you were, how stable and secure, I guess I just snapped. "So you decided to destroy my security to make yourself feel better." I thought. She paused, struggling with words that clearly tasted like poison. "I thought you'd just handle it like you always do. Cover for me, fix it, make it go away. I thought $11,000 wasn't that much to you." The casual dismissal of my financial well-being, even in her apology, made my jaw clench. $11,000 represents 6 months of emergency savings, 6 months of security that you stole while I slept. "I know that now," she whispered. I never think about how my actions affect other people. I just see what I want and I take it, and somehow it always worked out before. Because I always made it work out. Because Mom and Dad always made it work out. Because we all spent 34 years protecting you from yourself." Julia nodded, tears flowing freely now. "You're right. You're completely right. I'm a spoiled, selfish, horrible person who destroys everything she touches. But Clara, I'm also your sister, the only sister you'll ever have. And I'm begging you, literally begging you to help me one last time." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. Not manipulation, not performance, not the calculated helplessness she'd weaponized our entire lives. Just desperation. Raw, ugly, genuine desperation. "Help you how I asked. Talk to the prosecutor. Tell them I'm getting help, that I'm going to therapy, that I'll pay you back every penny even if it takes the rest of my life. Please, just give me a chance to prove I can change." I was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "And if I don't?" "Then I go to prison and probably come out worse than I went in. Then our family is broken forever. Then you spend the rest of your life knowing you chose revenge over redemption." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. This was the moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for since the night she'd robbed me the choice between justice and mercy, between consequences and compassion. I looked into my sister's eyes and spoke with the calm certainty of someone who'd already made peace with their decision. "Julia, I spent 34 years choosing your comfort over my own well-being. I chose family loyalty over personal boundaries. I chose to enable your worst impulses because I thought that's what love looked like." Her face crumpled as she heard the finality in my voice. "But love isn't covering for someone when they hurt you. Love isn't sacrificing your own security to protect someone from consequences. Real love, healthy love means letting people face the results of their choices so they can finally learn to make better ones." I walked to the door and opened it. "I'm done. All agreements now belong to police and lawyers. You have no power over me anymore, Julia, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm completely at peace with that." She stood there for another moment, looking small and broken and utterly defeated. Then she walked through my door and out of my life. I watched through the window as she got into a beat-up Honda that definitely didn't belong to her. As the car pulled away, I felt something I'd never experienced before in relation to my family, complete and total freedom. My phone was already ringing, probably Mom or Dad calling to guilt me about Julia's visit. I let it go to voicemail. They could scream, cry, threaten, or beg all they wanted. The old Clara who would have answered that phone and absorbed their emotional manipulation was gone. This new version had learned something valuable. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone hit rock bottom. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to face their demons without a safety net. Julia would figure out how to survive prison, or she wouldn't. She'd learn to take responsibility for her actions, or she wouldn't. She'd emerge from this experience as a better person, or she wouldn't. But whatever happened, it would be her choice, her consequence, her journey. And I would be free to build a life based on my own choices, my own values, my own definition of what family really means. For the first time in 34 years, I was nobody's cleanup crew. And it felt absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, justice, and ultimately, liberation. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what your thoughts are about Clara's choice. Was she right to press charges? Or should family loyalty have won out? Please comment below to let me know where in the world you're tuning in from so we can connect with fellow listeners. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about family boundaries and when enough is truly enough.